think the events of yesterday kind of play into what you discuss in this film. The ideologies of a few affecting the greater many. I was wondering if you wanted to comment on sort of the connection between what obviously you focus on in MLK slash FBI and what occurred yesterday in the Capitol.
Well, listen, our film MLK FBI is about a man who's basically trying to make change happen in America, saying that America is for everyone, that we should all be considered first class citizens, not second class citizens. And the struggle he had to make that happen. I mean, the wall of resistance that he faced, not only with people in the streets, but even from the federal government. And on the other hand, we have another man, J. Edgar Hoover, who's the director of the FBI, whose challenge, whose goal, whose obsession is to first destroy this man because he feels that he's a threat to his notion of American democracy. You know, so it's fascinating to see how this film has such resonance now with what we saw yesterday, and how there's a group of people basically saying this election was a fraudulent election. This is not fair. We're going to storm the Capitol and intercede to stop American democracy. It's really frightening when you think about it. That what happened in the '60s with the civil rights movement, with the anti-war movement in Vietnam, with all of that protest, all that mobilization to make change happen, to resist, demagoguery, is still present in this country today. America's history is long and bloodied. It's a long, bloodied history, and some people forget it that, basically the country was built on slavery, enslaving people, and basically, having people have no freedom. And the idea that when people want change, there's people out here who say no, you're not going to stop it. It's part of America's DNA, dude. It's part of America's DNA, and that's what we saw yesterday. And I watched this stuff on television like many people did yesterday, and I was really distressed, man. I am I'm 70 years old, and I've lived through so much, and I thought this is happening in America. You know, I shouldn't be surprised, but I was. You know,
Well, just an offshoot from that was thinking about the imagery in your brilliant documentary, sir, of the violence that occurred as we went through the movement with Dr. King, and the movement still continues today, and how stark the response to that movement was and has been in recent months for equality, as opposed to the response that happened, say, yesterday, in terms of who was storming the Capitol, their background, etc. I mean, if there ever was an example of two Americas,
you saw it.
you
You
saw
saw
it.
you saw it yesterday. It's like if you go back and you watch that image of the soldiers standing in front of the Capitol during the Black Lives Matter protest in the summer of 2020, and you look at what you saw yesterday, where there was barely any resistance in terms of the police force, in terms of armed force. It's amazing. There's two Americans, and there's always been two Americans. And there are people out here in America who say to themselves, we don't want this country to be different. We want this country to be a certain way, and certain people shouldn't have a voice. It's amazing. It's amazing. That's why we're always talking about voter suppression, disenfranchisement, systemic racism. It's a part of the American DNA. And that's what King and Andy Young and Ralph Abernathy and Dorothy Cotton and all these young people who were fighting the struggle in the 50s and 60s were saying, this country should be about bringing everybody together. We want change. It shouldn't be two societies. But in many places, in many ways, it still is.
Do you think that Dr. King would have been surprised by yesterday?
No, no. He would have been saddened, but he wouldn't have been surprised. He wouldn't have been surprised. I mean, listen in the film to the woman who interviews him on the talk show, and she says to Dr. King, don't you feel like your peaceful protests are leading to violence? Didn't we hear that over the summer? Don't you feel your people are moving too fast, Dr. King? Didn't we hear that? We hear that all the time. I mean, he wouldn't have been surprised. He would have been saddened, like I was saddened. I wasn't surprised, but I was saddened. I said, Jesus Christ, man, this is supposed to be America. We're supposed to be, you know that what's that phrase we use? America's supposed to be a beacon of light, a
Hmm.
beacon of light, you
Yes, sir.
know. And when I go across the seas, when I've gone to Europe, when I've gone to Africa, you know, and I hear people say disparaging things about America, there's a part of me that has this you know anger inside of me saying that you don't want to say it about America, but America is that. It's like America is so full of so full of contradictions, man. And you would think that by this time we would be a better nation, but it's not.
I think that that's where your film comes in, and why it's such a timely release, and it has such great messages in it, is that we can see that the more things change, the more things have stayed the same, and that now we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and go, what we're trying to do isn't working, and we have to move forward. We're still seeing these same things happen again and again and again. If it isn't, the certain pocket of people going up against Dr. King, it's a certain pocket of people who think voting didn't go the way they wanted. It's
Yeah,
always to be something. There's always someone who's being disenfranchised.
that's the feeling. That's how they feel. You know, you know. I mean, imagine this. You know, Dewey, is that if black people had all got together and basically went down to the Capitol and said, "We've been disenfranchised for hundreds of years. We've had it, and we're going to attack." I mean, there would be blood on the streets. There would have been massive blood on the streets. That's the divide we're living in. You know, the divide is when you see this footage of these people yesterday walking through the Capitol, taking selfies, smashing windows, you know, because they don't have any respect for the rule of law. None at all.
And what gets me is that you could take imagery from your film and intersperse it with some imagery from the summer, and obviously there is order. They're trying to make change in the most peaceful manner
Yeah,
possible. And then
yeah.
you could look at it with what happened yesterday, and you could say, well, wait a minute, which group is following the rule of law, A, B, or C? And you would say A and B 100 out of 100 times, even if you took it out of context, what was going on in these particular moments, you could see and say, oh, that's a riot. Well, which one is going to have the worst response? I guess my question now is this: what was it? What was the hardest part of going back through your history? Because making the film is part of your history. You lived through
Yeah,
this movement.
sure.
And did that pain, or the hardest part of making that film kind of come up in light of recent events, sort of just reliving
It
that violence, seeing what was occurring?
it didn't come up when I was making the film, you know, because as you said correctly, I lived through this period. So I was 18 years old when Dr. King was assassinated. I was 13 years old when John Kennedy was assassinated. So I've lived through this period. It was, in some ways, it was traumatic on me. But yesterday, seeing what I saw yesterday, the pain of what I lived through felt like it felt pale compared to what I felt yesterday. You know, because here I am, as I'm saying, I'm 70 years old, 70-year-old man. I've seen a lot of history. I've seen a lot of life, but I couldn't believe what I saw yesterday. I just couldn't believe it. You know, I was wedded to the television yesterday for 5 hours. You know, I just couldn't believe this. This is. I said to myself, "This is happening." Now I knew it happened. I know it happens, but I just, I was feeling so despondent this morning when I was watching Morning Joe that Jesus Christ, I've made a film that looks at this kind of intensity and craziness, and here it is, 2021, still happening. It's
Absolutely.
mind-boggling.
Has anybody from Dr. King's family, or anybody associated with the principal players of what happened during the Dr. King's height of the civil rights movement, seen your documentary and given you any feedback?
You know, we haven't had one peep. There's not been one peep from the King family or the King estate. You know, we heard from some of the subjects that we shot in the film. I mean, David Garrow and Donna Murch and Beverly Gage. I don't know if Andy Young has seen the Clarence Jones, but they've all liked it, you know, and all thought that we did a really good job in telling the story. But no, not a word. And I was surprised because the King family is always so on top of people using Dr. King's image and Dr. King's voice. I was pretty sure they would reach out to us to cease and desist on some level, but there's been none. No response.
Was it tough getting all that audio and getting all those all the different media sources you
Nah,
used to put this
it
together?
was easy. That wasn't hard. I mean, it's all in public domain. You can get all. I mean, you have to pay for it. You have to fair use it, but it's all there. It's all available.
What do you hope people take from your film, and move forward in terms of, the lessons, applying
I
them?
the big lesson I feel like they should take away is that this was a major tipping point in American history, but it was not the only one, and that America, unless we figure out who we are and where we've come from and how we need to change, we're doomed. We're doomed. We could be doomed. Take a lesson from this film, and understanding the trajectory of what King had to deal with and what Hoover and the FBI were doing, and say, never again. That's why you have the attitude. You have to have that attitude about the people with the Jews with the Holocaust. Never again.